Okay, so now that I have cleared the air about what happened yesterday on my channel, I was reminded this morning of something else. And this is kind of a fun story for some people. Fun story for me, anyway. And I'm going to share it. And this is going to be a positive video. I'm not going to complain. And it is about traveling. So, here goes. Back in March of 2016, my husband Bill and I went on a whiskey cruise with Hebridean Island Cruises. This was our second time on that line, and technically our third cruise, because the first time we went, it was a back-to-back cruise, and this time was just a single week. And it started in Greenock, I believe, Scotland, and I think it ended in Oban. And basically, that week, we just went to different whiskey distilleries. And then afterwards, when the week was over, we made plans to go to England. Because I wanted to, first off, see the show Avenue Q. I got kind of obsessed with it in 2016. I still love that show, even though it's really kind of not relevant anymore. But it is relevant if if you were born in the 70s and you were told that you were special, and there's all this Sesame Street. I guess the 70s and the 80s, the Gen X crowd. But the show is from like 2004, and when the internet was in its infancy. And I guess today, some of what's in that show is not so relevant, unless you want to look at it from a historical context. On the other hand, some of the songs are great. Like, for instance, the ending number, For Now, which is basically a reminder that everything is temporary. It's just for now. Which is comforting. Anyway, moving back to my main topic. So we were going to go to Stoke-on-Trent to see that show. And then afterwards, we decided to go to Mildenhall Air Force Base, which is in Sussex, I think. Suffolk, Virginia. Suffolk, England. Sorry, I grew up near Suffolk, Virginia, so... Anyway, we decided we were going to go down there. And the reason being was because my dad used to be the base engineer at Mildenhall Air Force Base. That was his final assignment before he retired from the Air Force in 1978. I was 5 years old when he retired, and I went to kindergarten in England. And I still remember it fondly. Those are my earliest memories of my life. Because I moved there when I was, I think I was about 3 years old. So maybe that's why I'm so comfortable living in Europe. But anyway, it was an eventful trip. And after our week on the cruise, I got very sick the last night of the cruise. We had our haggis and whiskey, and I went down to the stateroom to go to bed, and in the middle of the night I woke up and I started vomiting. I think I might have gotten norovirus, which was the first time I've had it cruising. I don't think that was a reflection on the cruise line. I think I might have picked it up at a distillery, to be honest. But anyway, it was not pleasant. I had stuff coming out both ends, and I was also premenopausal, so I also had my period. We had to get off the cruise ship, and Hebridean is a wonderful line. They're very luxurious, I would say. Everything is included. And when I told the purser that I was really sick with noro, I mean, Hebridean will drive you to the train station or the airport. You get on a bus, and that's part of your fare. But I was like throwing up. So what they ended up doing was hiring a taxi for us. And this poor taxi driver had to drive us from Oban to Greenock. And needless to say, it wasn't a very nice time. At one point, I had to run behind a big rock and change clothes. And we got to Greenock, and we ended up having to call up the hotel where we were going to be going in England because I was just too sick to keep going. And we had to postpone our reservation for a night. And we stayed in Scotland. And actually, the rental car guy was so nice to us. He booked us a room, but I think he got the wrong date. So when we went in to get the room, they said, well, we don't have you registered. But it was okay. They had room for us. And then the next day when we went to get our car, the guy was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he upgraded the car for us and gave us an automatic, which was nice because I think this might have been the first time Bill ever drove on the other side of the road. So we drove to Stoke and we saw Avenue Q. And by that time, Bill was getting what I was getting over. And then after a night there, we drove to Mildenhall. And the reason I wanted to go to Mildenhall was because I wanted to see where I used to live. And I want to see the kindergarten where I went to school. But also because there is a road on Mildenhall Air Force Base that was named after my dad. I heard this story many times growing up, and my dad actually used to have a sign that one of his buddies made for him, had made. This was back in the 70s, remember. So my dad went home to the States on a duty, TDY trip. And there was a road on the base that apparently did not have a name. So one of his buddies, some guy who I think he was Italian, had a sign made. My dad's last name was Tolly, Tolley. And in England at that time, there was a type of beer that was called Tolly Cobbold beer, but it was spelled Tolly. This beer was made from the 1700s. And they stopped making it in, I think it was 2002 is when it was discontinued, or sometime around that time. But they still made it when we lived there. And we actually had a bar towel for Tolly Cobbold beer because, our name was Tolly. So this fellow had a sign that said Tolly Cobbold Road, but it was spelled like our last name, Tolley. And when my dad came back from his trip, they had already put this sign up, and they called the military cops, and the cops were in on it, I think, or something. They called my dad and wanted to know where this road was because he was the base engineer. It was just a really funny joke. So I wanted to see this road. And sure enough, we got there, we drove around, we found Tolly Cobbold Street, I think. Spelled Tolly, right outside the base. But then we drove on the base, which didn't have a guard in the area where I used to live. And I found my house that I hadn't seen. It was 2016, so it had been 38 years. Place still looked the same. I took pictures, and then I turned around, and there was the sign. It was a different sign, actually. It was not the one that they had put up. It was one that was updated. My cousin, whose last name is also Tolly, was at one time stationed at Mildenhall Air Force Base. And he met my dad's former secretary, who did not know who he was. And she says, "You remind me of a gentleman I used to work for." And she said his name, and he said, "Well, that's my uncle." And then he heard the story about the road, too. But it is so funny to me that, I kind of wondered, is this a bullshit story? But I don't think it is. Apparently it's not. But even if it is a bullshit story, it's funny. The name Tolly, which is an English name, and it's our name. And that road did not have a sign when we lived there, and then they put one up. I often wonder if people that are stationed there, if they saw that sign and they heard about Tolly Cobbold beer and wondered if it was a typo. But it was quite a thrill to see it. That was a bucket list item. And it was really neat to see where I went to kindergarten and to see the Bird in Hand bar, where I remember going. It was a British bar, but I remember going there with my family. And again, it has been such a pleasure and a privilege to live over here and to explore and see places that I once remembered. And England being a very foundation place for me when I was growing up. I only hope that we'll continue to be welcome there. So I hope this was a fun story for you, and I think maybe that will do it for today, unless I make a music video, but we'll see. Weather looks like it might be nice, so maybe I'll do something in the backyard. See you next video.